Hello and welcome to this edition of Elvenhome, which is some 4 weeks later, I think, than I promised in the last episode. Can I first of all just say thank you to everybody that inquired after my health and well-being. I'm very grateful to you all for your concern. I just needed a bit of time to go away and do other things, I think, when I stopped being chairman, after I stopped being chairman of the Scottish Railway Preservation Society. It had been quite a demanding period. And so I went and did some other things. And I also encountered something of a brick wall or a brick roof with the engine shed, because I got to a point where I couldn't see how to complete a design, which I'll explain about more in this video. So let's get on and have a look first of all at the lighting of the engine shed, about which I posed a question in the last video. One of the reasons why there's been something of a longer period between the last video and this one is connected with the design of the roof and the lighting of this engine shed. I had some really wonderful responses to the last video. People both commenting on my idea of using copper tape set in attached to the roof and suggesting LED strips and other things. And I will show you because I've wired one lamp in place, which I'll show you in just a moment, show you it on. And there's going to be 10 of these lamps now wired in eventually. I'm grateful to 3 people in particular who suggested an alternative. The first was Chris Inge at Wheezy Palace. David Kutz also suggested the same thing, and Tony at the Heritage Line channel, which is that instead of putting copper tape in under the roof, I should get some, which I think they'd seen on other websites, on other channels, if I get some here, some brass rod. And this is some brass rod, and use that as my bus, and then I could solder the lamps to the brass rod. And that indeed is what I have done. If I show you here, you can see the 2 lengths of brass rod which run through the roof truss. And then if I bring it up to here, you will see the kind of lamp, and let's get this into focus. You will see the kind of lamp that I'm looking to have. I just need to focus in. Is that focusing? Yes, I think that's sort of vaguely focusing. So there's going to be another 9 of these. So there's 5 each side, and 1 wire is attached to, the black wire goes to this side, the red wire goes to that side, and the 2 wires at the end will feed off and go into the lighting bus that's underneath the layout. To give you an idea of what this looks like, I'm actually going to switch this on, and I'm using here, Tony, the little rig that you made up for me, which makes sure that only 3 volts goes through to the lamp. Very kindly, Tony at the Heritage Line offered to make up essentially it's pieces of wire with a resistor in to make sure that from a 9 volt battery or a 12 volt it comes down to 3. So there you can see the first lamp with all the other lights on. It's perhaps not showing as much, maybe it's showing some. So those are the lamps that I'm looking to use, and there will be 10 of them eventually. They don't give, I mean, it's only coming, I don't know whether I'll be able to get a bit more brightness into that, but that is, I'm pleased with that. That's what I wanted. I'll put the 10 in. If they do look underpowered, I could actually go the whole hog and have, what would it be, 9 each side. But I think that'll be fine. I think once all the others are in and the roof is on, that will give enough light without having problems of light bleed. So the first lamp is in. They're quite fiddly to do. They're incredibly thin wires. And one of the problems that I was encountering, and I've encountered with the wires on these before, is how to strip the wire, because if I show you the lamps, these are the lamps. The lamps all actually come with resistors in them, but I'm going to be using a unit that I've bought. Trying to remember who I bought it from now. From Kite's Lights, which is this thing here, which you wire in, so 12 volts in one side and 3 volts comes out the other, and because I've got so many lamps here, to save me having to put a resistor on each one of them, I'm going to use this unit to bring the voltage down to 3 volts for the whole thing. At least that's the theory. As you can see, these have lots long wires on them, but they're very, very thin wire. And I finally invested in a DCC Concepts, let me just get this out, stripper, which does a fantastic job. If this one is deliberately for smaller sized wires, they do another one for doing the bigger chunking things. And as you see, this has got a setting here, that's a locking nut. And although you won't be able to see it, I don't think you can see, this one here is set to strip the wire off that very fine cable, and it does a fantastic job. So if you're doing lots of lighting and you haven't got something like this, I do have a normal set, these kinds of things, but it's the holes were just not the right size to do that. And I certainly wouldn't want to try and gauge using that to strip the wires off. So the lighting has gone in, and because that lighting has gone in that way, it freed up, at least, in theory, it freed up and made making the roof a lot simpler. And that's where I hit a brick wall, because I simply could not begin to work out how to build the roof. Now, this section has gone on quite long enough, so I'll take a break here and we'll go and do something else, and then I'll come back in part 2 and talk about the design of the roof, which is the design ended up being something of a series of serendipitous events rather than me actually coming upon one solution. So I'll come back and talk about the roof in just a minute. One of the few pieces of scenic work that I have managed to get done was to put the ground level for the gasworks. What was originally there was the same as just the painted, this is a cork top to the baseboard. And I used some of the Javis asphalt to provide a base, and the base actually goes all the way behind here and then into this corner piece here, which is going to be where the scrapyard is going to be, and more of that in a moment. So that just gives me a kind of tarmacy base for the whole of the gasworks, which is a change, I think, from what I said in the last video. I was going to use a different surface of the Javis, but when I put it down, it just didn't look right. The size of the individual pieces of the scatter just looked too big for Engage. I think they were probably something like 7 or 8 inches across each in real scale. And been scrabbling over huge rocks just to get from one side to the other. But that's gone down, and I think looks pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. The next piece of work you can just see lying on its side. This is scale model scenery fencing. I'll put a link in the description below which one it is. It's the same one actually as was used over on Longbottom Terrace to divide the railway from the roadway. It's a little bit fiddly to put together, but not too difficult, and it makes a really good fence. So the fence is going to go on, and the buildings will be put in place. They're not going to be stuck down, the buildings, I've decided, because I don't know what's going to happen. Eventually I will come to the end of this layout and may want to do a new one, and I may or may not need these buildings, and if I don't, I may well want to sell them, and I don't want them all stuck down. So then they're not going to be stuck down, they can just be placed there. I think they'll be quite happy with that. What will then happen is that the fencing, there's 2 buildings to go in there with the gateway that takes you in. There'll be fencing taking from the roadway here around to divide this off, and then I'm going to put some paving eventually will come along here and some grass, and I'll do the Scenics in a bit. But I just thought I'd do it at this section before I put those fencing in and get the buildings in, so you can get a look of what the extent of the gasworks is going to be. And when I come back after I've done that piece of work, I'll also talk a little bit about the scrapyard. So give me a minute or two to do this work, and then we'll come back and see how that looks. With the power of modern technology, I'm able to give you a slightly different view of this area than I've been able to do so far. I've had to, since the last video, I had to replace my phone because my iPhone 8, the battery was beginning to degrade. So I brought forward what was going to be a replacement at some point this year, and I now have an iPhone 12. And that encouraged me to have a look around, because it has really a much better camera on it and more than one lens, to have a look around at a different app for doing the recording than the standard video recording that comes with iOS. So I'm now using Filmic Pro, which is a very clever little thing indeed, I have to say. And the more I learn how to use it, I think the more things I'll be able to do with it in filming. But one of the advantages of that is that I don't need to be near the phone. I'm currently viewing what's on the screen on the phone on my iPad, because I can link the two together. So if I wanted to make a change to the screen, I can do that from the iPad. At least in theory I can. I've not actually tried to do it yet. So back to the work that's been done here. As you can see, I've put the fence in along the front. Now I am going to do some weathering along there, and I want to put a strip of, I think along this area here, I'm going to have that probably as largely grass with a pathway going along. Because as it comes, you can't see off of screen, but as it comes through the one of the arches of the viaduct, that I'm going to all have as scrubland and slightly boarded off, because it's not meant to be an access point. And then I've put the coal in the coal bunkers, and that the damp patches is the glue drying. We'll see what that looks like when it's completely finished. And I will probably dry brush some light grey paint over the left-hand coal stays, because coke is not black. I mean, the black is the coal. Coke has, from what I can see in pictures, has a kind of ashen grey look to it, as you might expect after coal has been in a fire for a while. And that really, I will leave that now and probably come back to it a bit later. But I do want to do the scenic work along here before I start work on the area of High Elvenhome, which is where the phone is currently sitting. That will also allow me to start thinking about doing the scrapyard. And at this point, I need to say thank you to Chris Inge, who got in touch with me from Wheezy Palace Models, as it now is. Those of you that follow Chris will know that he's now, although he's still going to be doing his N-gauge model layout, he's really begun to enjoy doing dioramas in different scales and intends to use his channel to show a bit more of his modelling skills. And I thought I would give you an example of his modelling skills. He very kindly got in touch with me and said he'd been keeping old offcuts of things to create a scrap pile. And if it was any use to me on here, he'd be happy to send it. And he also had somewhere around a cast resin scrap pile, which may be useful. So I'll put in shot first of all I'm having to work back to front. This is very weird. The cast resin one, which he very kindly sent to me. But this, which is an absolute work of art, is the scrap pile that he created. Let me just see if I can get this into focus. There we go. This is the scrap pile that he created from lots of little bits stuck onto a plastic base. And I mean, that is just a brilliant piece of modelling. And you'll have seen the ash pit that he sent to me, which is already on the layout. So thank you very much, Chris, for those. Another shout out for Chris and his channel. And I'll put a link to that below so you can go and have a look. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing the wider range of modelling that he's intending to be doing and using his channel to promote. Those two, that has given me an idea for doing something similar with a whole bag of scrap pieces and offcuts and goodness knows what else that I have, because I think, as I mentioned in the last video, I bought various things to create the scrap pile, to scrap yard, but the scrap yard is really very, very big area. You sort of forget in Engage, it is a very big area. So I'm probably going to cut off a bit of the area by just turning it to vegetation as the kind of derelict bit that they couldn't really make much use of before the scrap pile. So the derelict bit, if I put my finger in here, is probably going to be up to about here. I will just make that all scrub and bush and overgrown. And then the scrap can start working its way down through to, where my finger's gone off screen. It will work its way down to there. If I just turn you round gently so I don't make you ill. Here we go. So the scrap will come down to here and then feed under the arch, because the main part of the scrapyard will be through here. So that will be the scenic work that I'm going to be doing at that point. If I take you up a bit, you can see, you actually get to see a different view of the layout there. So I can see me making good use of Filmic Pro and the ability to look at things remotely, because I'm able to adjust both the focus area and the exposure remotely, which is really rather helpful. So that pretty much completes this part of the video. Now let's go back and complete the work on the engine shed, and in particular how I eventually worked out to design the roof. In the earlier clip I mentioned that there was a good degree of serendipity about the way in which I have finally hit upon the design for the roof. And as I'll explain, it was a series of things that happened that finally have got me to a design that I think will work, including sheer incompetence on my part on at least 2 occasions. Once I'd settled on how I was going to light the roof, it actually gave me a lot more freedom in the way I was going to design the roof itself, or how I was going to light the engine shed, how I was going to design the roof, because I didn't need to make provision for copper tape running on the roof, which would have potentially limited the way in which I built the roof, and certainly the extent to which I could put any kind of windows or fan lights set into the roof to give light from outside. However, having done that, I hit an absolute brick wall. I could not think, how was I going to design the roof? I couldn't see fan lights that I liked the look of until I came across Smart Models. And I was looking at Smart Models, and I saw on their website, their 3D laser cut windows, north lights, which are for a north light engine shed. And you'll know that the north lights are the ones which have the, let's get this right, they have the zigzag roof. So doing that sort of shape. And then the lights are set like that. And that's wonderful, I thought. That's exactly what I want. So I ordered 3 packets, 18 of them, which I thought was enough for what I had in mind. However, I hadn't read the website correctly, because at 00 scale, they are indeed 3D laser cut in MDF, I think. But at N scale, of course, it's much harder to cut 3D. So they use a kind of plastic, if I show you. Oh, have I got the right one? No, that's the wrong one. If I show you, bring it to here. Come on, shall we have fun and focus? Thank you. And so that arrived, And I thought, oh dear, that isn't quite what I wanted. I'll use them in something else. It's my fault. I hadn't properly read the very clear description on the website. So I put that to one side and kept searching. And I kept searching until fairly recently, when the Bachmann releases for the autumn range came out, and I saw the modern servicing depot that's due back in stock, which I think actually is a 00 scale. But if I bring it into shot, that's the thing. And I looked at the roof of that and I thought, oh, those are very similar to those lights the North Light windows that I bought from Smart Models. That looks just the thing. So I went back to the idea of using them and thought about being able to put them into a long line, and then I would have a set, 4 sets on each of the things giving light into the window. And in fact, I've made one up. And here you see them all 6 together. Now I haven't coloured these, just so you can see the Smart Models recommend, and I've done it on this one. What you essentially do is you paint over the window and then wipe it off immediately. And obviously, as you can see, the paint stays in the frame. It does that because of the way the laser cuts on it. There are scratches within each pane itself. And of course, if the paint gets down into that, you won't get the paint out. But actually, that has, I think, a rather nice weathered look about it. But I don't want to do that for this because I'm putting it within this frame, and then the 2 halves of the window will sit on top, and that provides the half size. And having made one up, I thought, excellent, that's great. I need to order some more because, let me just get the focus back on here. There we go. That is 8 of them along this side, and I only had 16, so I obviously needed to get enough to be able to do both sides. So I shot back onto the Smart Models site, cheerily ordered another 3 packets, and they arrived, and I took a look at them and thought those aren't the same, because what I received was this, which, as you'll see, is very different to this. And I sort of fumed and thought, how dare they change the design? This is hopeless, until I checked the website. And as you will obviously have guessed, I ordered a different kind of window. This is a fan light as opposed to a North Light window. So I was at first a little disappointed. Because obviously the idea was there was going to be another one of these, and I thought, well, I can probably get round it. I'll carry on by having these bigger ones on the outside and then the smaller ones on the inside, and nobody will notice. Until again I looked at the Motive Power Depot and I thought, well, actually, if I put it round that way, sorry, I'm playing around with it's giving the autofocus here something of a game to play. Hold on a minute. If I put it on that way round, and if I could line them up so they sat between each of the trusses, that would look quite good. And finally, the design of the roof settled in my mind. What you can see in front here, along here, these are all separate pieces because I've only just cut them out to see if I can sort of achieve it, is how the design will be for the outer parts of the wall. I don't want all 4 the same. So the outer parts of each canopy will have these big fan lights to provide a lot of light from the sides. And then on the inside, I'm going to use these ones, as I intended, as a thinner run that is casting light over the top of where the people will be working. So it's a more continuous set of light. I'm probably going to fit, in fact, I probably will fit, between each of these where these lights join. I've got thin enough strip styrene, probably 1.5 meter wide strip styrene, which I will put between them. This has actually been painted the off-white colour to get rid of the plasticky look, and so that will be fairly straightforward. But I also liked the look of the roof of the Motive Power Depot, which is that kind of Well, I don't suppose it is corrugated metal. It may even have been originally asbestos board because they tended to use that. So I bought, if I stop the shine on this, some of this, which is obviously corrugated tin foil, or at least ribbed tin foil. And this again is where serendipity works. This L shape is 1.5 meters deep. The other plastic card is 1 millimeter deep, and so I was thinking about how I was going to, I would probably have this sitting a bit proud of the other two sides of the roof, and that will look okay. This is 0.5 millimeter deep. So once I build the roof up, because there'll be a continuous strip across the top, continuous strip across the bottom, the roof lights going in between, and that will be true of all four, it'll just be different windows. And then using the this as to cover them and provide what will look like a metal or asbestos-y type roof. It will all sit flush. So I now have worked out how to make the roof, and all I've got to do is go away and do it. The ends of the roof are going to be cut with this card, which I think it's evergreen card, and I think it's just described as novelty, a novelty design. I don't know why it's a novelty design, but it's just what I wanted. And of course, obviously, I've used this as the template, and there will be two pieces. Where's the other one? That's the plastic one. So these two pieces have been cut out together. So one was cut out first, and then put on top of the back, not the front, because I need them to line up and match perfectly. And if this first one is out either way, and I do it both on the top side, then when I turn it round, it won't match up. So that's the first one, and they're going to sit. One pair will sit in here. That is actually 2 millimeters wide there. So one sits there. Another will sit on the front. So I've got another 6 of these to cut. And then the roof will sit between them, and that will all be flush, he said, hopefully, if I check. That should all be sitting flush across the beams. But I think that's gone on long enough, this section, so I'll bring it to an end here, and you'll see more of what's intended for this in the next edition. So I think that is enough now on the engine shed as a catch up on what's been going on or not going on. So let's move on to look at something else. Well, I hope you enjoyed that edition of Elvenhome, brought you up to date with where I am at the moment. I've got plenty of things that I can now get on and do, and the enthusiasm and time, more importantly, in which to do them. So I hope to now resume the fortnightly production of the videos, and so I hope to speak to you again in about 2 weeks' time. If you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. It'd be great to have you along. If you've got any comments, please let me have them, because they've helped me so much in the build of the layout and in solving problems when I encountered them in the past. So until I speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.